The cracked wooden last lay on the dusty counter between a tin of loose tacks and a rag that still smelled faintly of polish. Daniel tapped it with 2 fingers and said, almost kindly, "You can take that, Teodoro, as a little something for your years here." That was how 38 years were handed back to him. Teodoro did not answer right away. He stood there in the back of the shoe house by the harbor market, where he had spent most of his life bent over leather, thread, and soles that had to be made right the first time. The room still carried the old smells he knew better than some people knew their own homes. Warm wax, dry cedar, sharp glue, worn aprons, and the quiet dust of work done by hand. But something in the place had changed long before this afternoon. Since the founder died, the shop had begun sounding different. Fewer taps from the hammer, more tearing of cardboard boxes, less patience. Daniel cleared his throat. "We're going another way now. Factory units, glued soles, faster turnaround. You know how it is." Teodoro knew exactly how it was. He looked down at the last. Even with the crack running through it, he recognized the shape. The founder's first form. The one kept for memory, not for use. A piece of hard wood, touched by the hands of the man who had once taught him what a hand-welt stitch meant: technique and respect. And now it was being given to him like leftover scrap. He picked it up. The wood felt dry, split, insulted, and still solid in the middle. Sometimes a person is dismissed before the world understands what those hands were worth. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe and stay with me, because Teodoro had not yet reached the street when he understood that Daniel had made a mistake. He carried that piece of wood home under his arm the way a man carries something fragile and insulting at the same time. The evening air near the harbor had a damp, salt smell to it, and the market was already closing down. Canvas awnings flapped, crates scraped over stone. Somebody laughed too loudly at a corner stall. Teodoro walked through all of it like a man hearing the world from far away. In 38 years, he had left that shop tired, late, hungry, sore, but never emptied out like this. His hands still felt the shape of the day that should have been his tomorrow. Awl, thread, leather, the old rhythm of work at the bench. A good shoe never came from hurry. He had learned that young, and he had paid for that lesson with his back, his eyesight, and half a lifetime of mornings. Mr. Bell, the founder, had seen something in him long ago: steadiness. Teodoro had been the one trusted with the difficult feet, the old customers, the pairs that had to be molded to the foot because pain has no patience for sloppy work. He knew where a shoe would bite before the customer even stood up. He could read wear marks like some men read weather. And when the hand-welt stitch sat clean and even, he felt a quiet kind of peace that only working people really understand. Daniel never learned to love that part of the trade. He loved display lights, faster sales, neat stacks of boxed pairs. After his uncle died, the place began filling with sharp chemical glue and factory soles that looked tidy from a distance. Teodoro had watched it happen one shelf at a time. Back in his room, he set the cracked form on the table, wiped the dust off with his sleeve, and then he noticed a cut in the grain, small and deliberate, something the old founder had carved there by hand. He held the form closer to the lamp and rubbed his thumb across that small cut in the grain. It was a mark. 2 short lines crossed by 1 longer stroke, the quiet sign Mr. Bell used on his earliest work before the shop became respectable and polished and well known around the harbor market. Teodoro had not seen that mark in years. The founder used to press it into patterns, into notes, sometimes on the underside of leather where only the maker would know it was there. Seeing it now, half hidden in cracked wood, did something painful to his chest. It reminded him that the old man had started with less than this. And that was the part Daniel never understood. The nephew had inherited a name, a front window, and a customer list, but he had not inherited patience. Teodoro had watched it in small changes first: bright posters, faster promises, glued units stacked in clean cartons. The old resoling bench pushed farther back, as if real repair work was something to be ashamed of. Then came the talk. People just want something decent. Most folks can't tell the difference. Good enough is still good. A man says that long enough, and pretty soon he believes it. But shoes tell the truth in the end. Teodoro knew what happens when a sole is forced where it should be fitted, when a shape is not molded to the foot, but bullied into place. The pain comes later. The return comes later. The complaint comes later. Cheap work always asks for payment twice. He turned the broken form in his hands again. Beneath the split, the hardwood was still tight, close-grained, alive, just trapped inside something that had given way. Near midnight, he wrapped it in an old towel, put on his coat, and headed for the one man in the district who still rented time at a back alley bench, if he liked what you carried through the door. By the time he reached the alley, the night had gone still, except for the drip of water from a bent gutter and the far-off rattle of a late cart on stone. The bench belonged to Gus Mercer, a repairman who had outlasted fashion by refusing to argue with it. His shop was hardly more than a narrow room behind a shuttered tailor's place. One yellow bulb, one iron stove gone cold, shelves with heel blocks, jars of nails, old brushes stiff with polish. The air smelled of damp leather and cedar shavings. Gus looked up from a half-peeled sole and narrowed one eye at Teodoro. "You're late for company," he said. "I'm not here for company." Gus gave the towel-wrapped bundle a glance. "No, you're here for work." Teodoro laid the cracked wooden last on the bench and unfolded the cloth. Gus stopped scraping. For a moment, he did not speak at all. Then he set his knife down carefully and touched the split with a knuckle. "Bell's first form," he said under his breath. "I haven't seen that in years." Teodoro nodded once. "Daniel gave it to me on my way out." Now, some people hear a thing like that and rush to pity. Gus was not one of them. He simply leaned back, studied Teodoro's face, then the wood again. Men who have spent their lives with tools can tell when another man has been insulted, and when he has come not to mourn, but to begin. "You want bench time?" Gus asked. "I want a corner, a lamp, and quiet." "For how long?" Teodoro looked at the tight grain under the crack. He could already feel where the good hardwood still lived inside it, waiting to be cut free, shaped again, made useful with honest hands. "As long as it takes." Gus wiped his palms on his apron, walked to the back, and came back with a ring of old keys. But before he chose one, he said, "If you're carving from that wood, you'd better see what Bell left in my drawer the winter he nearly lost the shop." Gus opened the drawer slowly, as if the wood itself might object to being disturbed after so many years. Inside was a folded packet wrapped in brown paper gone soft at the edges. Teodoro could smell old dust, dry glue, and that faint, sweet scent paper gets when it has sat near cedar for a long time. Gus handed it over without ceremony. "Bell left it with me back when the winter freeze nearly finished him," he said. "Told me if he ever lost the front shop, he could still start again from what was in there." Teodoro unfolded the packet on the bench. There were rough foot tracings, a few pattern pieces cut from thin card, notes in Mr. Bell's hand, quick and practical, about balance, heel pitch, width across the ball, where pressure lies when a man stands all day on stone. And at the bottom, wrapped in cloth, 2 small carving knives and a stub of blue chalk. Just the first things a real shoemaker needs when all the furniture and polish are gone and only the work remains. That kind of inheritance, if you've ever seen it, does something to a person. Not because it makes life easy, but because it reminds him he is not the first honest worker to be pushed toward the edge and told to disappear. Gus pulled a stool over with his boot. You can use the back corner. Rent by the week. Cheap, if you don't waste my space. I won't. No, I don't think you will. Before dawn, Teodoro had the lamp lit and the old forms set in front of him. He studied the crack, found the living heart of the hardwood, and made the first careful cut. A dry curl of wood lifted under the blade and fell to the bench like a shaving of time itself. Then, footsteps sounded in the alley, and someone stopped at the half-open door while the first new shape was still hidden inside the old one. The footsteps paused, then a woman's voice came through the doorway. Gus, if that kettle of yours boils dry again, the whole alley will smell like burnt tin. It was Ruth Hanley, who lived above the shuttered tailor's place and knew everybody's business without being cruel about it. She stepped in with a scarf wrapped tight around her hair and stopped when she saw Teodoro at the bench, sleeves rolled, shoulders bent over the wood as dawn thinned the darkness outside. Gus grunted. He's renting the corner. Ruth studied the rough form in Teodoro's hands, then at the curls of hardwood there. Well, she said softly, that looks more honest than half the things sold under bright lights. That was all. No pity, no long questions. She set down a chipped cup of tea beside him and went back upstairs. Sometimes kindness is not talkative. Sometimes it knows better than to lean too hard on a sore place. By mid-morning, the alley had fully woken. Crates bumped over cobbles, someone argued over fish prices out on the main road, and the little shop filled with the clean scratch of blade on wood. Teodoro worked steadily, trimming, testing, turning the shape in his palm. He was not trying to copy the old form. He was freeing what was still good inside it. A new last had to be balanced, true, able to become something molded to the foot of a living person, not just a memory kept on a shelf. That day, no customers came. The next day, none came either. He borrowed a scrapboard, wrote in plain chalk, "Custom shoes and repairs," and leaned it by the alley entrance near the resoling bench. Then he waited, and worked, and waited some more, until, late on the third afternoon, a woman with one careful limp stopped before the sign and touched the doorframe, as if asking permission to hope. She stood there for a second, fingers resting on the worn frame, as if one wrong step might send her back out into disappointment. Teodoro wiped the fine wood dust from his hands and came around the bench. The woman was somewhere past middle age, dressed neatly, but her shoes told the truth before she did. The left one bent badly at the outer edge. The right heel was worn down in a way that made her shoulder dip when she walked. Pain leaves handwriting on leather if you know how to read it. "Can I help you?" he asked. She gave a small, embarrassed laugh. "I'm Clara. Ruth said there's a man down here who still knows how to look at feet instead of shelves." That line almost broke his heart. Clara took a seat, slowly. She explained that for years she had bought pairs that looked decent in the shop mirror and felt cruel by late afternoon. One foot had never set right after an old injury. Not enough to call it a tragedy, just enough to make every ordinary day harder than people guessed. She expected the usual answer, a polite shrug, maybe a suggestion to buy something softer and hope for the best. But Teodoro crouched in front of her and listened. He asked where the ache began, whether stairs made it worse, whether the ankle rolled when she got tired. Then he lifted each shoe, pressed the leather, studied the soles, and had her stand again. This was the part people forget costs something: attention, time, the willingness to notice what another person carries in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. "I won't sell you a promise. but I can make you a trial pair, built for how you actually walk." Clara looked at him the way thirsty people look at a full cup. "And if they still hurt, then I change them." She opened her bag, took out her handkerchief, and unfolded enough bills for a deposit. Teodoro pushed half of them back toward her, and just then, from the mouth of the alley, a familiar voice said, "So this is where you landed." Teodoro knew that voice before he turned. Daniel stood at the alley entrance in a clean coat that had never seen dust from a real bench. He did not step fully inside. Men like him preferred thresholds when they wanted to feel above a place. His eyes moved over the chalk sign, the cramped shop, Clara in the chair, the wood shavings on the floor. Then he gave a small smile that was not quite friendly. "So," he said, "you found yourself a corner." Teodoro stayed where he was. "Looks that way." Clara glanced from one man to the other, sensing the part no one had explained out loud. Gus, from the back, kept scraping a sole as if he had not heard a thing. Sometimes the best support in the world is a witness who refuses to tremble. Daniel spoke lightly, but there was a pinch in it now. He said the old shop was doing well, that customers liked the new lines, that this trade had changed and Teodoro had simply failed to change with it. Then he looked at the deposit still on the bench. "You don't want to overpromise," he told Clara. "Custom work sounds nice until delays start." Teodoro finally stepped closer, steady. "If I tell someone I can do a job, I do it." That answer landed harder than a raised voice would have. Daniel's smile thinned. He muttered something about sentiment not paying rent and walked off with the quick, clipped stride of a man who wants the last word and knows he didn't get it. When the alley quieted again, Clara let out the breath she had been holding. "Was that your old employer?" "My old place," Teodoro said. "Not my work." Then he took her measurements properly. Chalk marks, string, notes, pressure points. The first trial pair would not be pretty first. It would be true first. And for the next several evenings, long after the market lamps had gone out, the little shop stayed lit until 1 week later, Clara came back wearing them. She did not sit down this time. Clara came in, closed the door against the draft, and walked the length of the little shop once, then back again. Slow at first, then easier. Teodoro watched the line of her shoulders, the way her weight settled, the absence of that old, guarded flinch when the left foot met the floor. Those are the moments a real maker waits for, the body telling the truth. "Well?" he asked. She stopped in front of him and blinked fast. "I kept waiting for the ache to start." Teodoro said nothing. "So I walked to the end of my street. Then farther. Then I took the long way home just to be sure." She looked down at the pair as if they had done something impossible. "Do you understand what that means to a person?" He did, better than she knew. He made one small adjustment near the instep, marked another note in chalk, and told her to wear them through the week. Clara tried to pay the rest on the spot. He took only what was fair, nothing extra for relief, nothing inflated because desperation had finally walked through his door. Honest work should not punish the person who needs it most. That evening, the alley felt less narrow. A bookseller came the next morning because Clara had sent him. Then a market woman with feet swollen from standing all day. Then a retired porter who needed one shoe built slightly higher than the other. None of them came for luxury. They came because somebody they trusted had said, "Go there. He listens." And while Teodoro's bench grew busy with leather, chalk, and the low tap of nails, Daniel's bright shop began hearing a different sound. Boxes coming back, voices asking for refunds, souls lifting sooner than they should. Teodoro did not go looking for that news. It found its way to Gus anyway, and before the month was out, another customer stepped into the alley with a request far more delicate than repair. a pair meant to be seen under stage lights. The woman who came for the stage pair introduced herself as Evelyn Marsh, and even before she sat down, Teodoro could tell her request would test more than neat workmanship. She carried the shoes she had been using in a cloth bag. From a distance, they looked elegant enough, narrow, glossy, meant to catch light. Up close, they told a harder story. The lining had rubbed raw at the heel, the toe box had collapsed inward, and the balance was off just enough to force her weight forward. A person can smile under lamps and still be suffering, and Teodoro knew that kind of truth on sight. I stand for hours, Evelyn said, and when I'm not standing, I'm turning, stepping, holding posture. They need to look graceful, but they can't fight me. He nodded and asked her to walk. So she did, there in Gus's little place, between the bench and the wall, while morning light came through the dusty glass. Teodoro watched her ankles, the lift of the arch, the way the right foot landed a breath sooner than the left. Then he crouched, pressed the worn insole with his thumb, and already knew what had to be changed. The pair had been made for appearance first and body second. That order ruins more things in life than shoes, if you want the truth. I can make them clean, he said, but I won't make them weak. Evelyn gave him a long look. Good. I'm tired of pretty things that fail me. For 3 evenings, he worked later than usual. Fine leather, stronger support hidden where the eye would not notice, shape corrected without making the line heavy. Every cut had to serve both grace and endurance. By the time he closed the final seam, his fingers were stiff and his shoulders burned. Then, 2 nights later, Ruth came down the alley with wind in her cheeks and said, Teodoro, you might want to hear what people are saying outside Daniel's shop. Ruth was still catching her breath when Teodoro set down his awl and looked up. She had come in with the cold on her coat and market dust on her shoes. They're arguing outside Daniel's window, she said. Not shouting, that hard kind of arguing where people hold receipts. Gus gave a low sound from the back of his throat but kept working. Teodoro did not rush to the door. He did not smile either. He only wiped his hands on a cloth and listened. Ruth went on. 2 customers had brought back pairs with soles lifting at the edge. Another wanted a refund because the heel had shifted after only a few weeks. Daniel was blaming weather, wear, misuse, anything that kept the fault from landing where it belonged. But people are not fools forever. A thing made badly may glitter for a day, then it begins to confess. Teodoro saw the stage shoes waiting on the bench beside him. He finished them that same evening under the yellow lamp, smoothing the leather until it held a quiet shine, checking the line, the balance, the hidden strength inside the heel. Nothing loud, nothing wasteful, just care. When Evelyn came for them the next day, she slipped them on and stood very still. Then she took 3 slow turns across the worn boards. A smile spread over her face in pieces, as if even she did not trust it at first. These, she said softly, feel like they were made for my body instead of against it. Well, they were. She laughed at that, real and surprised. Before leaving, she asked for 4 small cards with his name written plainly on them. People backstage talk, she said, and they notice more than they pretend. After she left, the shop felt different again. Fuller somehow, though no one else had entered. Late that afternoon, a tall man in a worn brown coat stopped at the doorway, eyed the bench, the shoes, the measuring notes, and said, "Are you the cobbler who still builds from scratch? I was told you might need another pair of trained hands." Teodoro did not answer right away. He looked first at the man's hands. That tells you plenty, if you know what to look for. These were not soft hands trying on a new identity for convenience. The fingers were strong but careful, marked by work that asked for pressure, balance, and patience. The man removed his cap and stepped in out of the alley draft. "My name's Noah Pike," he said. I used to fit braces and supports at a clinic before they folded the department into some bigger system. Different trade, I know, but feet are still feet, and bad balance still ruins a person's day. Gus glanced up at that and gave the smallest nod. Teodoro gestured to the stool. Sit. Noah sat. He did not talk too much, which helped him. He watched the bench, the leather stacked by size, the notes near Evelyn's pair, the tools laid in clean order. Then his eyes settled on the partly carved forms Teodoro had been shaping from the salvaged hardwood. You build your own? He asked. When I have to. Noah leaned forward, interested now in earnest. Most men don't. They adjust around the problem. You're changing the foundation. That was the first thing he said all afternoon that made Teodoro really look at him. The two of them spoke for nearly an hour about arch collapse, uneven gait, pressure under the ball of the foot, why a shoe that looks balanced can still make a person miserable by evening. Different language in places, same respect for the body underneath. And every so often, outside on the street, another wave of raised voices drifted from the direction of Daniel's shop. When Noah finally stood to leave, he said, If you need another pair of eyes, I'm here. After he was gone, Teodoro turned back to his bench. There, near the lamp, lay a sealed envelope Gus had set aside without a word. It had Daniel's name on the front and Teodoro's underneath it. Teodoro turned the envelope over once in his hands before breaking the seal. The paper was old, the fold gone soft, the edge carrying that dry attic smell of dust and cedar. Daniel's name had been written first, yes, but lower down, in a different ink, was Teodoro's, added later in Mr. Bell's hand. That alone made the room go quiet. Even Gus stopped moving for a second. Inside was a short letter. Bell had written it years before, in the blunt, steady way he spoke. If the shop ever passed to hands that stopped respecting the work, Daniel was to read the first half. If there was still one person in the place who understood fit, patience, and duty to the customer, that person was to read the rest. Bell named Teodoro plainly. No poetry, no grand blessing, just trust, written down before death had any say in it. Folded behind the letter was a storage receipt and a key. Gus scratched his jaw. That'll be the old lockup by the market sheds. Bell kept overflow there when business was good, and a few things he never wanted in the front. Teodoro read the note again under the lamp. The second half was even simpler. If you are the one holding this, take what still serves the work. Leave the rest. Now, listen, there are moments when life does not hand you revenge. It hands you responsibility. And that is often heavier. The next morning, before the market fully woke, Teodoro and Noah walked with Gus to the lockup. The metal door was streaked with rust. The key fought them before it turned. When it finally gave, the smell came first. Old leather, paper, oil, and time shut in darkness. And there, beneath drop cloths and dust, Teodoro saw shelves, tools, and one long ledger laid on a crate as if someone had meant to return for it. The ledger was the first thing Teodoro lifted. Dust came off in a soft cloud. Inside were years of names, measurements, notes in Bell's plain hand, and page after page of what mattered most. Not sales, but people. Left foot turns out after noon. Needs room across the toe. Stands all day, don't cheat the support. Noah read over his shoulder and let out a slow breath. This was memory organized by care. In the back of the lockup, they found more than Teodoro expected. Clean hardwood blanks, a small press, old tools wrapped in oilcloth, and patterns Belle had saved from the days before the front shop became polished and proud. From there, the work grew steadily, then fully. Noah joined him. The alley bench gave way to a modest storefront. Clara sent more people. Evelyn sent still more. Over the years, while Daniel's bright window filled with return slips and thinner shelves, Teodoro's place filled with fitting stools, quiet trust, and shoes that held up under real lives. Daniel's shop did not fall in a dramatic afternoon. It drowned the way careless businesses do, receipt by receipt, refund by refund, and within 4 years, it was shut. At his busiest, Teodoro kept one private practice. From the cracked wooden last that had been handed to him as an insult, he shaved the soundest slivers and hid one tiny chip inside every heel he built, so a piece once thrown away could go on bearing weight with honor. That is how some things are redeemed, not by being displayed, but by becoming part of what carries another person forward. Late each evening, after the lamps were turned low, Teodoro would open the ledger, brush the leather dust from its pages, and add one more careful line. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe if you'd like more stories where quiet work gets the last word.